So crude oil just crossed $95 a barrel, which, if you're running a construction business right now, means you are currently bleeding, anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 a year from this invisible leak in your operations.
Yeah, it's a massive hit.
Right. And the most frustrating part is that this bleed actually has absolutely nothing to do with what you are paying at the pump today.
No, it really does. The pump price is really just the final sort of visible symptom of a much deeper operational inefficiency.
Exactly. So welcome to this deep dive for the Scaling Legends podcast. Today, we're unpacking the mechanics of how top-tier contractors are offsetting this massive Q1 2026 18% oil price spike.
And, they're not just maintaining their margins, but in some cases, widening them.
Yeah, well, everyone else in the industry is just scrambling to revise their bids.
Yeah.
I like to think of the current oil market like a slow-motion leak in your heavy machinery's fuel system.
That's a good way to put it.
You're operating as usual. You think your margins are solid because, you bid the job 3 months ago, and you don't even notice the drip until the engine completely sputters out mid-project.
Yeah.
And suddenly your profitability is completely stranded.
Right. And to fix that leak, you have to look far beyond the local gas station. You really got to dissect your contracts, the geographic footprint of your job sites, and the daily workflows that dictate how your fleet actually moves.
You have to understand the specific timeline of the damage, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline first, because this is where so many operators just get completely blindsided. If crude oil spikes $10 on the global market on a Tuesday, why doesn't my local distributor just hike the price on my bulk delivery on Wednesday?
Well,
Why does it take 4 to 6 weeks for that hit to actually reach a contractor's balance sheet?
Right. So it comes down to the mechanics of replacement cost accounting and inventory cycles. The fuel you're pumping into your excavators today, that was pulled out of the ground, refined, and distributed weeks ago. Yeah, so the wholesale distributors you buy from, they operate on bulk contracts based on those older, lower commodity prices.
Okay, hold on. If the local supplier is sitting on millions of gallons of cheap inventory, shouldn't regional competition just force them to keep their prices low until they physically have to buy the expensive crude?
You'd assume the free market works that way, right? But wholesale fuel is priced on a replacement cost model. The moment the global index jumps, the distributor knows their next wholesale purchase is going to cost a premium.
So they start adjusting early.
Exactly. They immediately start jacking up their local terminal prices to build the capital required to buy that next, more expensive batch.
So they're padding their wallets for the future purchase.
Right. And that capital building phase, combined with the physical transit time from, say, the Gulf Coast refineries to your local terminal, that creates a staggered 4 to 6 week lag.
Man, so as a contractor, you are bidding a job today based on a false sense of security. You look at your local supplier's daily rack price, you build your estimate, but you are executing the physical earthwork in a month, exactly when that massive replacement cost spike hits your local market.
That lag is the trap. You bid the job at a lower cost basis, but you pay for the execution at the inflated rate. And your margin gets crushed right in the middle of the mobilization phase.
That's brutal.
It gets worse. There's a secondary trap here. We all fixate on the diesel powering the fleet, right? But a crude price spike triggers a staggered shockwave across all petroleum-derived materials.
Wait, you mean like materials for the actual job?
Yeah. We're talking about the heavy-duty grease for the machinery, the massive drums of hydraulic fluid, the bitumen binding your asphalt.
Oh, wow, of course.
And those supply chains do not move at the same speed as diesel. Like diesel might hit your balance sheet in 4 weeks, but specialty chemical products go through a much more complex manufacturing and secondary distribution cycle.
So it's completely out of sync.
Exactly. In fact, according to Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, failing to forecast this specific 4 to 6 week lag across the entire supply chain is exactly what is costing contractors tens of thousands of dollars.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second. Forecasting a multi-tiered supply chain delay, that sounds like a total logistical nightmare.
It's not easy, no.
You're telling me a contractor needs to build a timeline that maps out a 4-week delay for diesel, an 8-week delay for hydraulic fluids, and a 10-week delay for asphalt, all while trying to actually win a competitive bid.
Well, yes, that is the level of operational intelligence required to survive $95 oil. If you are just using a flat historical markup for materials, you're flying blind.
Wow.
And honestly, that math gets even more complicated when you factor in the physical location of your job site.
Okay, yes, let's transition to that. The geography of profit.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If oil is a globally traded commodity, shouldn't a gallon of diesel hurt a crew in downtown Chicago just as much as a crew out in rural Texas?
You'd think so, but no. The numbers show geographic fluctuations of 15 to 30% in actual fuel cost impacts.
Wait, really? Break down the mechanics of that variance for me.
Sure, it's basically the difference between terminal gate pricing and delivered pricing. So in a major urban market like Chicago, you have a highly competitive fuel distribution network.
Right, tons of suppliers.
Exactly. You have multiple wholesale suppliers pulling directly from major pipeline terminals located just outside the city. A contractor can negotiate aggressively because the logistics of moving that fuel 10 miles down the interstate are negligible.
Because the supplier's overhead is incredibly low.
Spot on. But remote job sites are a completely different financial ecosystem. Contractors working more than 100 miles out from a major terminal are losing an additional 15% to 25% to fuel surcharges compared to urban crews doing the exact same scope of work.
Okay, let me challenge that penalty. Even if I'm hauling out to a remote site 100 miles away, it's what, just a couple of extra hours on the highway for the delivery tanker? How does a 2-hour drive translate to a 25% penalty on the total fuel cost?
Because you aren't just paying for the extra 2 hours of the driver's time, you're absorbing the supplier's entire logistical vulnerability.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when a fuel supplier sends a tanker 100 miles into a rural market, they are paying for the physical degradation of their truck, they're paying their own inflated fuel costs to get there, and most importantly, they are charging you for the deadhead return trip.
Oh, the deadhead. Wait, so driving back empty?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That tanker is driving back to the terminal completely empty. They bake the cost of that empty return trip directly into your delivered price per gallon.
Oh, man. Not to mention, if you're operating 100 miles out, you probably only have one, maybe two regional jobbers willing to deliver bulk fuel to your site anyway.
Right, you have zero leverage to negotiate.
You're basically paying a monopoly premium just for the privilege of operating far from a city center.
Yeah, and if you don't have bulk tanks on your remote site, the inefficiency just multiplies. You're paying for the idle time of your own commercial trucks, making long, inefficient round trips to the nearest rural truck stop, paying retail pump prices just to refuel.
That's insane.
So if you're a contractor, you cannot use a flat, company-wide fuel contingency for your bids. A downtown excavation and a remote pipeline trenching job require entirely different financial models.
Which brings us perfectly to the defensive playbook. Now that we know where the money is leaking, how do we plug the hole before a job even starts?
It starts at the contracts.
Right, but playing devil's advocate here, if I'm quoting a massive commercial build 100 miles out, I can't just swallow a 25% geographic fuel premium. But if I slap a massive contingency buffer into my proposal to protect myself, aren't I just going to lose the bid to a guy who didn't?
Well, what's fascinating here is that top-tier operators don't hide blind contingency buffers in their bids. They use transparent fuel escalation clauses.
I hear that term thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But how does an escalation clause actually function mechanically? Because from a client's perspective, signing a contract where the final price can just magically increase sounds like a non-starter.
It requires indexing and setting a mutual threshold. An escalation clause ties the cost of fuel for the project to a publicly available metric. Usually, that's the Department of Energy's Regional Diesel Price Index.
Okay.
You state your baseline bid based on the index price on the day the contract is signed. Then you establish a deadband.
A deadband,
Yeah.
like a buffer zone.
Yeah, exactly. You might agree that if the DOE index fluctuates up or down by 5%, neither party owes the other anything. You both absorb that minor risk.
Makes sense.
But if the index spikes 10% above the baseline during the heavy earthwork phase of the project, the contract dictates that the client covers that specific mathematically proven delta.
I see the logic, but aren't clients just going to cross that clause out during negotiations? I mean, they want absolute price certainty.
That is where you have to sell the value of the clause. You explain to the developer that without an escalation clause, you are forced to bake a massive worst-case scenario risk premium into your baseline number. You tell them, look, if I take on all the commodity risk, I have to charge you 15% more upfront just to protect myself. If you share the risk via this index, I can remove that 15% blind contingency and give you a much leaner, more competitive upfront price.
Wow. You're framing it as a discount. You're giving them the choice between paying a guaranteed premium today or taking on the statistical risk of paying a localized premium tomorrow. That changes the entire tone of the negotiation.
Exactly. It shows the client you're a sophisticated risk manager, but contracts only protect you from future clients. We need to look at financial defense mechanisms for the fuel you're burning right now.
Right. So it's specifically forward contracts and fuel price locks. Let's dissect those. I've seen mid-size operators try to play financial defense by locking in fuel prices, and they basically end up playing day trader with their operational capital. And it rarely ends well.
Yeah, speculating on fuel prices when you don't have a guaranteed backlog of work is essentially gambling. But a forward contract is entirely different.
How so?
It's an agreement with your regional supplier to purchase a set volume of fuel, say 50,000 gallons, at a fixed price, delivered over a specific future period, like a 6-month project window.
Let me stop you there, though. If I go to my regional supplier today with crude at $95 and say I want to lock in 50,000 gallons for the next 6 months at today's rack price, aren't they just going to bake their own massive risk premium into that fixed rate?
No, actually.
Because they aren't going to take a financial loss if crude hits $110 next month, right?
Right. But the supplier doesn't take the risk. They hedge it on the back end. When you sign a forward contract with a major distributor, their trading desk immediately goes to the commodities market and buys financial futures to offset the physical volume they just promised you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They lock in their margin and you lock in your cost basis. You aren't paying a massive premium to the supplier. You're just paying a minor transactional fee to secure financial certainty.
Okay, but there's a volume barrier to entry there, isn't there? A Tier 1 civil contractor moving millions of yards of dirt has the volume to command a forward contract. But how does a $5 million a year commercial landscaper or a regional roofing company secure that kind of financial instrument?
They utilize co-op buying, or formerly known as group purchasing organizations, GPOs. Mid-size contractors operating in the same geographic region form an LLC. Or they use an existing trade association to pool their annual fuel consumption.
Oh, that's smart. So instead of 5 different contractors negotiating 10,000 gallons apiece, the GPO goes to the terminal and negotiates a 50,000-gallon forward contract.
Exactly. And they secure the Tier 1 volume discount. The GPO holds the primary contract with the supplier, and the individual contractors draw from that secured allocation.
Wow.
When executed with proper legal escrow and letters of credit, these specific hedging strategies can easily save a mid-sized contractor $15,000 to $25,000 annually.
So securing your margin through financial instruments is crucial. But defense just keeps you from going bankrupt. The offense is how you actually scale the business.
Right.
We established earlier that the operators who are actually saving $50,000 or more aren't just hedging their fuel. They are actively using technology to eliminate the waste entirely.
Yeah, they're moving from managing the cost of waste to engineering the waste out of their workflows altogether.
Because bailing water out of a leaky boat is fine, but workflow automation is like upgrading to a speedboat. In fact, based on Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, contractors who use predictive budgeting to forecast fuel costs 90 days out are successfully locking in pricing right before the spikes hit.
Yes. They're using data to see the wave coming. But the real operational shift happens when they pair that forecasting with AI-powered workflow automation.
Okay, let's talk about that. Because predictive budgeting allows you to buy fuel intelligently, but workflow automation dictates how you burn it. We have to look at the mechanics of automated dispatch and dynamic road optimization.
Exactly.
But, automating dispatch feels like a buzzword sometimes. Break down the mechanical difference between a traditional dispatcher with a whiteboard and an AI-driven routing platform. How does that translate to actual gallons of diesel saved?
Well, a human dispatcher operates on static assumptions. They assign an excavator to a site, load a lowboy trailer, and send the driver on the most direct highway route.
Right, the standard way.
But an AI platform operates dynamically. It ingests live municipal traffic data, monitors weight restrictions on secondary bridges, and tracks the real-time idle status of every machine in the fleet.
Wow, all at once.
Yeah. It routes the heavy transport around elevation changes that burn excess diesel and coordinates the exact arrival time of the machinery with the availability of the setup crew.
I look at it like air traffic control. A traditional dispatcher is just telling planes to fly to an airport. If the runway isn't clear, Those massive heavy machinery planes just circle the site, engines running, burning jet fuel while they wait.
That's a perfect analogy.
And the AI is the tower, right?
Yeah.
Calculating the exact speed and trajectory so the machinery lands on the site the exact second the crew is ready to mobilize.
By establishing that level of air traffic control, contractors are cutting their physical fuel consumption by 8% to 12%, and they're achieving that without sacrificing any operational capacity.
Which makes sense for the trucks on the road. But earlier you mentioned that operational efficiency and administrative efficiency are the same thing. How does automating the paperwork back in the office stop an excavator from burning diesel out in the dirt?
Through document intelligence and schedule risk detection.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's walk through a day in the life of a mismanaged project. A project manager has an inbox flooded with RFIs, requests for information. An engineer sends an email on a Thursday noting a structural concern with the shoring plan for an upcoming trench. In a traditional office, that email just sits unread in a massive thread.
The classic administrative bottleneck.
Exactly. So on Tuesday morning, the excavation crew mobilizes. They drive 3 heavy haulers and a crew of 6 out to the site, which is a 90-minute drive. They fire up the excavators, start staging the equipment, and only then does the site superintendent get a phone call from the office saying the shoring plan hasn't been approved and they cannot legally dig.
Oh man. The crew just burned hundreds of dollars in diesel, hauling the equipment out. They leave the excavators idling for an hour while they argue on the phone, and then they burn more diesel hauling everything back to the yard. 0 project advancement.
It happens all the time. Now look at the AI-managed workflow. An AI platform utilizing natural language processing is constantly scanning project emails, daily logs, and permit databases. It reads the text of that RFI on Thursday, recognizes the keyword shoring plan, cross-references the project schedule, and flags a critical path conflict for Tuesday's excavation.
Wait, really? The system understands the context of the delay before the human even opens the email?
Yes. It immediately alerts the dispatcher to pause the mobilization order. The trucks never roll, the excavators never fire up.
It's incredible.
When you eliminate the communication chaos, you eliminate the physical waste. Contractors who fully integrate these document intelligence systems with their fleet operations are seeing overall fuel cost reductions of 20% or more. Efficiency beats commodity volatility every single time.
A 20% reduction is just staggering. It proves that in a world where oil sits at $95 a barrel, administrative busy work and siloed communication aren't just annoying overhead anymore. They are a direct threat to a company's survival.
Absolutely.
The global oil market is not going to adapt to your profit margins, which means your business operations just have to adapt to the market reality.
You have to evolve.
Speaking of evolving, let's look past the $95 barrel for a second. We've spent this entire deep dive dissecting the logistics and financial mechanisms of diesel and crude. But think about the impending transition to electric heavy machinery.
Oh, that's a whole different beast.
Right. If you are currently bleeding margins just trying to transport liquid fuel to a remote site through a traditional supply chain, how is your operational model going to handle grid infrastructure? If you think fuel surcharges are punitive now, wait until you have to figure out how to pull megawatt charging infrastructure to a greenfield site 100 miles from the nearest substation.
It's going to be a wake-up call for a lot of operators.
The operators who master operational efficiency and automated scheduling today are the only ones who have the logistical discipline to survive the infrastructure constraints of tomorrow. If you know a contractor who is struggling with fuel surcharges or supply chain costs, send them this episode. It could save them thousands applying these strategies. Hit follow on whatever app you're listening on so you don't miss tomorrow's intel.
And to learn more about the tools and intelligence discussed today, visit smartbusinessautomator.com.